After 4 decades of armed struggle against the Turkish state, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, says the fight is over. The group, which is seen as a terrorist organization by Turkey, the U.S., and the EU, says its mission to combat the repression of Kurds in Turkey has concluded, and that the Kurdish issue can now be resolved democratically. Ankara has welcomed the move as a historic milestone, but says it will watch the disbandment of the group closely. Between 40 and 50,000 people were killed since the PKK launched its fight in the 1980s. Tonight, it seems the bloodshed might finally end. I'm Nicole Fröhlich in Berlin, and this is The Day.
The terrorist organization has announced it has decided to disband and hand over its weapons.
I'm very happy today. We are very happy. Let there be no more bloodshed in our country. Let us have a peaceful country.
I think the decision taken by the PKK is a historic and important one.
I don't think it's right to make a deal with terrorists.
We call on all parties to seize the moment and embark on an inclusive process based on dialogue and reconciliation.
Welcome to The Day. After 4 decades of fighting and the deaths of as many as 50,000 people, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK as it's known, says its war is over. The group announced the move just days after it held a party congress in northern Iraq.
With hope and glimmers of optimism, this is how residents of a mainly Kurdish city in southeastern Turkey reacted to the news of the PKK Kurdish militant group ending its armed struggle after 40 years of conflict.
I went out of the streets this morning. I saw the happiness on people's faces. I asked what happened. They said the process had started. We were very happy about it. With God's permission, it will continue. You all saw this atmosphere. God willing, it will continue. We, the Kurdish people, never really supported the war.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan also welcomed the news.
The terrorist organization, the PKK, has announced that it's decided to dissolve itself and hand over its weapons. We see the decision as important in terms of cementing the security of our country, the peace of our region, the everlasting brotherhood of our people.
The PKK launched an insurgency against the Turkish state in 1984, seeking an independent socialist homeland for Kurds on the territory of southeastern Turkey. The conflict spilled over into northern Iraq and northern Syria, with as many as 50,000 people killed. The announcement by the PKK that it was disbanding came 3 months after the jailed founder of the militant group, Abdullah Öcalan, urged his fighters to lay down their arms. But details of the peace initiative have not been made public, and it's not clear how weapons are to be disposed of and who would monitor the procedures.
Aslı Aydin Taşbaş is a Turkey analyst and visiting fellow at Brookings Institution. Aslı, welcome back to The Day. Just give us a sense of how significant the PKK's decision to disband is.
It is huge. It is a major geopolitical event, I would say, because this insurgency has been going on for the past 4 decades, even almost 5 decades, because PKK was founded in 1978. And 45,000 people have lost their lives, mostly Kurdish, I should add. But in an insurgency that ran beyond Turkey's borders, including, Syria and Iraq, certainly, and, of course, Turkey. The peace process came out of the blue. It's been only a couple couple of months in negotiations since late October, but it is nonetheless very important, not just for Turkey's security, Turkey's domestic harmony and reconciliation between Turks and Kurds, but also Syria. Syria is another place where we're going to see a reflection of this peace process.
Yeah, we'll talk about Syria in a second, but first, you say it came out of the blue. Why are we seeing this now?
Well, a number of reasons. I think this is the resumption of a peace process that ended in 2015. I think both Turkey and the PKK realize that we live in a very dangerous geopolitical environment. For Turkey, I think they feel they have great leverage in Syria now with the downfall of the regime, Assad regime. But unless they consolidate domestic front, the Kurdish issue will be a constant vulnerability. But for President Erdogan personally, I think he's keen to peel off Kurds from the opposition bloc, sort of present maybe a constitutional referendum in a couple of years' time that would allow him to extend his term limits, which are currently running out in 2028. And for the PKK, look, they clearly understand that Turkey has military superiority, particularly with the drone technology, armed drone technology it's been investing, but also it has reached its geographic limits in Iraq and Syria and has run into issues in Turkey, both militarily and in terms of politics. I think that PKK also realizes that U.S. presence in Syria will come to an end soon. Donald Trump clearly signaling that he'd like to pull out U.S. troops. So both sides have a number of reasons. And the interesting thing in the language that they had, that has come out of the PKK declaration that had already been put out by Abdullah Öcalan, the imprisoned Kurdish leader in February, is this sense of redesigning Turkey as a shared homeland and a Turkish-Kurdish entity. That is very different from the language we've heard from PKK over the years. It's very different from the language we've heard from the Turkish government over the years, which had been focused on counterterrorism, etc., and nationalism. So we will see that if there will be a domestic constituency for this new idea of Turkey as a Turkish-Kurdish entity, a shared homeland.
Are all PKK factions on board with this move, or are we going to see splinter groups resisting, you think?
There have been an internal debate that is very clear, and it didn't come easy. The debate mostly took place between Öcalan and the PKK leadership, mostly in Kandil Mountains, but there was also a conversation with the Syrian Kurdish groups that are now involved in their own parallel track with Damascus. But I would say that this is a very disciplined organization. I think this splinter groups we're unlikely to see unless the organization decides there should be splinter groups. It is more the case that PKK, even if it's not entirely convinced that it can trust the Turkish government, has decided to take a leap of faith based on what Öcalan, its leader, has said. Öcalan has said several times that he is willing to serve as the guarantor of this process, that he's going to take the risk himself. So I think PKK, even though they're expecting a number of steps from Turkey, clearly this wasn't just a declaration. They don't see this as a surrender, but they are willing to be the first to act.
What would a promising peace process have to look like? And is the current Turkish government really interested in this?
Well, we're going to see now, I think, for there to be a real process, there needs to be real constitutional amendments, changes that both, I think, guarantee what Kurds demand in terms of equal rights, particularly in language and so on, but also some type of a change in Turkish penal code, which would allow people to come out of jail. Don't forget, there are many Kurdish politicians and even ordinary citizens who are in jail for supporting the PKK. And that is not because of the peculiarity of the Turkish anti-terrorism law. That does not always mean you are a card-carrying, arm-carrying member of the PKK. Sometimes social media posts, sometimes political participation, and even activities of the pro-Kurdish political party has been deemed by Turkish prosecutors of supporting the PKK. And there's a clause in the anti-terror law which says, even though you're not a member of the terrorist organization, you can be tried as if you are a member for support for the organization, or its goals. So I think there is a lot of people that will feel relief if the Turkish parliament was to pass a package that amended the penal code or the anti-terrorism law. So now is the task in Ankara. In order for this to be a really meaningful process, Turkish parliament has to act. And there, what the government will do will be important, but what the opposition would do,
that's on the government level. But let me jump in there, because decades of bloody conflict also come with a lot of trauma. How does Turkish society feel about all of this? And the prospect of amnesty, maybe, for someone as prominent and as important to the PKK as Abdullah Öcalan?
To be very honest with you, Turkish society is all very shell-shocked. They're not quite ready for this. I don't see, at least on social media and with people I'm talking to, I don't see a huge jubilation. I think they have not been prepared that this is coming. Unlike the previous peace process, which started in 2012 and a lot of public conversation, and it was coined as a process to advance Turkey's democracy. This happened behind closed doors this time, and the public is all of a sudden hearing a declaration from Öcalan, hearing a declaration from the PKK, and I think they are a little bit caught unaware. So it's very important for the government now to use its convincing power, and AKP does have, the government of Erdogan does have at least a certain amount of sway over his own voters to push for this agenda of a peace. Right now, what we have seen Turkish government do is only to describe this process as a process to finish terrorism. But they have to go beyond that and say this is also good for our citizens, for Turkish democracy, and for an advancement of Turkey in different ways, whether it's political or economic. We have yet to see that.
A long road ahead. That was Turkey analyst Asli Aydin-Taşbaş. Always great to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Well, let's bring in DW correspondent Dorian Jones. He joins us from Istanbul. Dorian, this was a unilateral announcement, but it will be seen as a win for President Erdogan. How does it benefit him?
Well, certainly is being presented as a major political victory for President Erdogan, effectively ending a bloody conflict that claimed over 40,000 lives, for what appears to be very little to be given in exchange. But what I think for Erdogan is seen as a major political dividend going forward is he's looking to change the constitution to allow him to stand again and end term limits in presidential elections. He needs the support of one of the main opposition parties, and he will be looking to the main pro-Kurdish party to gain support for a change in the constitution, and possibly even looking to secure Kurdish votes in a forthcoming presidential election. In the past, he had been successful in securing Kurdish votes, and he will be looking again to that possible dividend as well. But there's also major political jeopardy for Erdogan, because it does appear to be a great deal of scepticism within the country. One opinion poll found 3 to 1 people opposed to this peace process. There's concerns about what is being given in exchange, particularly particularly the fate of the PKK leader Abdullah Öcalan, who's been held in prison. There's a great deal of concern among many people in Turkey that he will be released. The government have denied that, but there's a great deal of suspicion, and with that carries major jeopardy for Erdogan, given the fact that he does rely heavily on Turkish nationalist voters.
The PKK says it has completed its historical mission. Are Kurds in Turkey today better off than they were back in the 1970s when the PKK was founded?
Oh, absolutely. You have to realize that when the PKK started its war in the early 80s, when Turkish military ruled this country, Kurds did not exist. They were referred to as mountain Turks. The Kurdish language was banned. Kurds couldn't speak it on the streets. Kurdish music was totally off limits. Today, Kurds' identity is accepted in the country. Kurds can speak freely on the streets. There's Kurdish TV stations, radio stations as well, and there's a main pro-Kurdish party, the third largest party in the Turkish parliament. So undoubtedly, there has been major steps forward in the past decades. But having said that, there is still political pressure. Thousands of members of the pro-Kurdish party are in jail, and also many of its mayors have been removed from office. So it's still very much a mixed picture. But I think the PKK say that they believe that there is now a space where they can transition to a political struggle. Although many would say the reason the PKK have also come to this announcement is because they are facing military defeat. Their insurgency in Turkey had effectively ended, and the Turkish military were closing in on their bases in Iraq.
What do you expect, now that you mentioned Iraq, this decision to mean for Kurds there and in Syria?
Well, I think undoubtedly this could be a major change in the region. The Turkish government have very good relations with the Kurdish regional government in Iraq. The ending of the PKK struggle will remove another obstacle to further deepening relations with the Iraqi Kurds and also with Baghdad. Turkey is very keen on developing its relations with Baghdad. The war against the PKK was an obstacle to that. Turkey wants to develop a major trade route running through from China all the way through Iraq into Turkey. This will undoubtedly help facilitate that peace with the PKK. Syria is another question. It's unclear what will happen there. Turkey says that this Syrian Democratic Forces, which is seen as an affiliate of the PKK, has to disarm as well. They say they are not covered by this. This is a potential point of tension and will be a major question that could overshadow the whole peace process going forward.
That's Dorian Jones in Istanbul. Thank you so much.